Jurgen Kropp, who is the coordinator of the Horizon 2020 project European Calculator, and the director of the research group in climate change and sustainability at Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research. Thank you.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's a pleasure for me to be here and to discuss a little bit about the European Calculator project. So I will not lose so much words about the European Calculator project. If you are interested in further details, please go to the website, or you have a poster here. There you can also get a few more insights. So I have entitled my talk, "The Needs, the Time, and the Irreversibility." And this has a reason. So because when we talk about societal transformations or the energy transformation, we have to ask ourselves how we can get, or how we can go, or how we can approach sustainability targets. And we have also to ask ourselves whether we have done already everything what is needed in terms of the time dimension and in terms of the irreversibility. So we come from the Global Calculator project, so at least 1/3 of the consortium was involved in the development of the Global Calculator project. I don't know whether you know that. You can also access it via a web address. It's also here on the poster. So that means to some extent we have a strategic advantage a little bit, but this causes also sometimes a few disruptions in the consortium because not all of the colleagues are on the same level. And in comparison to existing modeling approaches, we are starting from a different point of view. Because in our model, at the end, the users can deploy technologies, for instance. That means, in other words, we invite users to make particular settings so they can decide what kind of future they might have, for example. Okay, so and some of the starting hypotheses of the European Calculator project you see here. So to our point of view, it's absolutely necessary that the European Union and also the European member states invest in future technology still. Yeah? Otherwise it will lose its strategic advantage or the first mover advantage. On the other hand, if you look on the global dynamics or in the particular dynamics of countries, we can also state already that renewables are unstoppable because they have already market advantages. So, and if you look on, let's say, innovation forecasts, so they are feasible, although sometimes criticized, we can also say that clean energy union is already becoming a reality. But the question is still, do we do the right things and fast enough? But the policy making is only one point. Yeah? So we have also to pick up the people, particularly at that point where they stand at the moment. And in regard to this, we will develop the European Calculator model, which starts from the Global Calculator approach, and we will give them the control over the system so they can design pathways by themselves and would see immediately how this materializes in carbon emissions, for example, and of course in an incremental temperature increase. Nevertheless, the problem in the sustainability transition is the time, and how this materializes I will show you on the next slide. This is taken from the IPCC. What you see here are the remaining emission budgets, and if you look on the remaining emission budgets, so they are not big. So that means if we want to keep the world below the 2 centigrade target, we can still emit around 365 gigatons carbon or 1,340 gigatons CO2. Yeah? This is not much if we compare this with the amount which we have been emitted already since 1850. Yeah? So that means if we would really stay below, then we have to make much more efforts in the member state countries, but also worldwide. So And one of the major entities which can make, or which can be game changers are cities. And this is actually what you see here. So we applied a kind of a Kaya equation to cities because we try to figure out how CO2 is, or whether, so what the proportionally is of CO2 and population, energy and GDP and population and CO2 and energy. And what you see here is that for OECD cities, we see already a decoupling. So the carbon dioxide emissions per cap are going down. And the GDP production per cap remains constant. And the same holds also for the energy users. So this is already a good news, but not much enough. So we need to do more here. Yeah? If we compare this with the developing with the cities in the developing countries, you see that CO2 per population or per cap is going up. Yeah? And the GDP per population or per capita is also going up as well. And the latter is quite good because that means their lifestyles are increasing too. But the energy uses per GDP goes down. So that means, in other words, we can gain efficiency. So, and this is a good news. So in the developing countries, we have the opportunity to do a lot in these terms. So can we make forecasts? Can we make technology forecasts? Yes, indeed we can. And you see it here by this example. Oh, sorry. Oh, this I unfortunately. So now we have the full picture here. So once again, you see here the different influence factors in terms of GDP and in terms of population, in terms of energy and CO2 and energy for two different cities. So on this slide, you see the certainty of technology forecasts, for example, and these forecasts are made on empirics, so empirical data. Although forecasts are often blamed in terms of uncertainty and in terms of scientific rigor, we can do that, and we can do it sometimes on empirical data and in a very simple sense, namely we can derive from empirical data so-called stylized facts, and these facts we can introduce or we can use in models. And on this slide you see also when we just make a projection for the photovoltaics, then and if you use this data, then we can see that by 2027, 20% of the primary energy is produced already by photovoltaics. But of course, still not enough. What are other advantages? So if we look into the market, yeah, we can say that already today, 10 million jobs in the renewable energy sector in place, and the leaders in employment are China, Brazil, the United States still, maybe this will change in the future, India, Japan and Germany. And the growth rate between 2015 and 2016 was quite high, namely 9%. And what is also remarkable here from my point of view is that 35% of all these jobs are filled by women, particularly in the developing countries. And these are good news. Yeah? So overall, 62% of these jobs are in Asia, in comparison to 51% in 2013. So the emission growth at the moment is 0.2%, while the economic growth is 3%, and this is once again a good sign that we have already a kind of a decoupling. So, and you see that the prices for the technology is decreasing over time on the left-hand side. That means, in other words, maybe that you have heard about that the Moore's law is valid, yeah? Although for specific businesses, we know that the costs are dependent on regional disparities, so we just discussed the situation in developing countries. It is also dependent on the technology friendliness of a government or of the people in principle. And also it depends on the cost of labor and transport. But on the right-hand side, and this is actually what I want to show you, because these are very, very fresh results. On the right-hand side, we have a calculation when countries will become carbon neutral. And the basis of these calculations are, once again, empirical data. So we use measured values, and we assume that any nation has a kind of an intrinsic dynamics, and this is what we can prove. We have a kind of a inverse parabolic behavior for countries. If you relate the development index, human development index, to CO2. And if you use this information, make projections until 2100, you see here how the US and how Germany, for instance, will develop. So Germany will approach carbon neutrality under actual policies already 2060. And this is the good news. So that means we need a little bit more in order to make it happen in 2050. While for the US, it will take place at the end of the century. So in this very diverse picture, you see for all countries worldwide. Yeah? Some are quite good, others are quite bad. Okay. And now it's not working anymore. Yeah. The European Calculator project wants to give the people an insight how trade-offs and synergies being created if you make decisions in different sectors. Yeah? So therefore, as I said, we give the control over the system to the users and ask them which kind of future they like to see, for example. And then this materializes in the end in a carbon emission budget. And what the program or what the tool also will do, it makes a connection to the individual behavior or to individual lifestyles of the people. And one main ingredient of the project is that we have for any sectors so-called ambition levels. So this is here for the consumption of meat, and the highest ambition level here, for instance, comes out of literature and reflects more or less the situation we have in the moment in India, for example. So the Indians are almost vegetarians. So therefore we took this as the most ambitious level, while the blue curve here more or less represents the nourishment style in terms of meat, particularly of an average US citizen. So, and this is how the global calculator fronted looks like in the moment. You see here the carbon emission curve, for instance, here the total carbon budget, the 2 degrees centigrade target, and here the temperature variation. So we have to deal still with uncertainty. Nevertheless, you can set the levers. You see them here. So for instance, this is a part of the diet composition. So I move them now to the most ambitious pathway, and if we do this, then the result looks like this. You see, carbon emission curve is going down, and we are sharply at the 2 degrees centigrade target with this only few lever settings. So these levers, of course, are partly correlated. And this is a big difficulty. So in the project in principle, so because we have to do it on a European resolution now, we will introduce more modules. So on lifestyles, for example, also on the usage of raw material, also the effects different lever settings would have on employment, and so on. So that means the model at the end will have a larger complexity, but we still believe that we keep, to some extent, simplicity and usability even for lay people, but particularly such a tool will be devoted to policymakers and interested, or people who are in the particular area. Okay, so that's it for the moment. Thank you very much, and I'm now open for questions.